The man who brought the North its crown is back, and if this report from Shams is real, the entire balance of the Eastern Conference may have just shifted in one brutal, beautiful move. According to the report, the Los Angeles Clippers are sending Kawhi Leonard to the Toronto Raptors in exchange for Brandon Ingram, Grady Dick, 2 unprotected first-round picks, 1 first-round pick swap, and 2 second-round picks. And honestly, the more you sit with it, the more this feels like one of those rare trades where both sides can walk away feeling like they got exactly what they needed. From the Clippers side, the logic is pretty straightforward. At the end of the 2024 season, Kawhi's trade value had almost bottomed out. A lot of people viewed his contract like damaged goods. Some even treated it like an unmovable negative asset. But over the last 2 seasons, his regular season availability has steadily improved. And last year, he was unbelievable. We are talking about 27.9 points, 6.4 rebounds, 3.6 assists, a true shooting percentage of 63%, and an offensive box plus minus of 7.4. That is not just still good. That is elite, near career best territory. So if you are the Clippers, this is the exact kind of window where you make the move. Kawhi only has 1 year and $50 million left on his deal, and he is already 35 years old. With the assets the Clippers currently have, it is hard to see a realistic path toward building another true title level roster around him. At some point, you have to stop pretending you are reloading and admit you are just delaying the rebuild. Instead of holding on too long, they sold at the exact moment his value bounced back. And there is another angle here that should not be ignored. The original report also mentioned the possible investigation risks still surrounding Kawhi. Adam Silver has seemingly hinted that the whole situation may gradually cool off, but as long as the player stays on your roster, that uncertainty never completely disappears. Once you move him, the league suddenly has far less incentive to keep pushing the issue. From that perspective, turning Kawhi into roughly 2.5 first-rounders worth of value feels like a very solid return. And to be clear, Toronto was not the only team interested. The Mavericks, Timberwolves, and Pistons were all reportedly intrigued, but from everything we know, Kawhi's real preference was always his former teams. He was only willing to extend with the Raptors or the Spurs. That makes perfect sense. Those are the 2 stops most closely tied to the biggest championship memories of his career. And in the end, he chose Toronto. He is going back to the city where he delivered the first title in franchise history. Back to the place where he became a permanent part of basketball folklore. Back to the team where he helped turn the North into a championship identity. Now the real question is this: how good would the Raptors actually be with Kawhi Leonard? Is this just a great story and a hit of nostalgia? Or are we looking at a real contender? I think it is very real. Because at its core, this trade is simple. Toronto basically upgraded Brandon Ingram into Kawhi Leonard. In a lot of ways, it feels similar to the old DeMar DeRozan. For Kawhi trade, DeRozan used to put up beautiful regular season numbers. The box score always looked strong. The production was there, but once the playoffs started, the flaws became impossible to hide, especially when LeBron James showed up and turned those weaknesses into a spotlight. At heart, that style was better suited to being the primary scorer on a weaker team than the centerpiece of a real championship offense. Then Toronto swapped him for Kawhi and the entire franchise changed. That is why, in this specific context, Ingram looks a lot like a lighter version of that same problem. His raw numbers are not bad. Every year, he can give you that Polish 20 plus 5 and 5 kind of profile, but the advanced metrics are far less flattering. This season, his estimated plus minus was actually negative. That does not mean he has no value. He can still create his own mid-range jumper. He can still punish weaker defenders in lower pressure matchups. But the deeper issue is that he does not organize an offense, and he does not bend the whole defense around him. He is not the type of player who can truly carry an offense as a real number 1 option when playoff defenses start tightening every screw. Even in his best playoff stretch, what he was really doing was attacking from the wing, finishing possessions, hitting spot-up shots, and taking advantage of weak side opportunity. That is very different from being the central ball handler who has to carry the structure of the offense once the game turns ugly. And then there is the defense. For a player with his size, Ingram's defensive impact has been pretty underwhelming. He offers very little as a help defender, which is frustrating because, in theory, that should be one of his natural strengths. Last season, he was Toronto's leading isolation scorer in the regular season. And yes, the surface numbers look decent, but once the playoffs arrived, everything dropped off hard. He averaged just 12 points per GAME, posted a brutal true shooting percentage of 44%, got targeted on defense, and Donovan Mitchell repeatedly went right at him. Then he missed the final 2 games with right heel pain. Across the season, Toronto often performed better when he was off the floor. That is the problem with his profile. The numbers show up, the real influence does not always follow. So no, the Raptors did not just trade for a bigger name. They replaced a playoff negative with an elite playoff finisher. That is not a cosmetic upgrade. That is a franchise-altering one. Now, obviously, this is not prime Kawhi anymore. The version who could walk into a series and single-handedly erase another team's best wing has lost some of that overwhelming force. But even now, he remains one of the league's best 2-way forwards. He can create efficient offense offense and ugly half-court possessions. He's one of the most reliable spot-up shooters in the game, and defensively, he is still strong, disciplined, and highly dependable. On top of that, he is extremely easy to fit into almost any roster. The Clippers spent years building around Kawhi and pouring major resources into that experiment. The tragedy was always timing. Earlier on, he kept getting hurt in the playoffs. More recently, his health improved, but the roster around him started aging. Players like Nicholas Batum were no longer the same, and the team ran into another structural problem: not enough ideal power forwards. Kawhi's always been most comfortable at the 3, not spending long stretches playing the 4, because once he has to live at power forward, his limitations as a passer become more noticeable, and the full value of small ball lineups becomes harder to unlock. That is exactly why Toronto is such an interesting fit. The Raptors might be one of the best remaining environments in the league for Kawhi Leonard. First of all, they have Scottie Barnes, a top-tier power forward in today's NBA. In some ways, you could even argue that among true impact fours, he is second only to Giannis Antetokounmpo. Barnes has already shown outrageous playoff value on both ends. Up high, he can pick up James Harden and Donovan Mitchell. Down low, he can hold his ground against Jared Allen and Evan Mobley. He covers an absurd amount of space, plays with constant energy, and still gives you 24.1 points and 8.6 assists per GA mean. That is not just versatility, that is offense, defense, and playmaking all packed into one player. Around Barnes, Toronto has already built a defense based on size, activity, pressure, and physicality. They were already a top 5 defense in the regular season, and in the playoffs, that defense dragged Cleveland all the way to a Game 7. Other than Ingram, just about everybody in the rotation can defend. Jakobe Walter and Jamal Shead are relentless at the point of attack. Toronto often plays an aggressive high hedge scheme, sending pressure at ball handlers and rotating hard to take away easy threes. Jakob Poeltl will step up high to disrupt pick and rolls, while Barnes and RJ Barrett have enough strength and size to help hold up inside. Then late in games, Toronto can go even further. They can play without a traditional center. The original notes mentioned a CMB-style interior replacement, but the real point there is this: a small ball frontcourt built around size, mobility, and toughness. If that front line is mobile enough next to Barnes, Toronto can get very close to a switch-everything defense. 3 wings plus 2 aggressive point-of-attack defenders can squeeze the value out of normal pick and roll mismatch hunting, and force opponents into a bunch of hard self-created shots. And that matters a lot for Kawhi. A lot of people say Kawhi needs a traditional center beside him, or the fit does not work. I think that way of looking at it is too rigid. Kawhi does not need a center just for the sake of checking a box. What he really needs is size, physicality, and a team that can drag games into a grind. If the defense is strong enough to make every possession feel heavy, slow, and uncomfortable, then Kawhi becomes terrifying. That is the kind of environment where his value spikes. Toronto can absolutely create that kind of game. They may not have some dominant superstar center setup, but they do have waves of switchable, physical defenders. Barnes, Barrett, Shead, Walter, these guys can rotate, absorb contact, then keep wearing people down. That means Kawhi does not have to spend every possession carrying the burden. He can focus on his matchup, pick his spots, and use his elite help defense instincts to strengthen the whole structure. Put simply, if Kawhi joins this roster, Toronto's defense probably becomes even nastier. And here is the ironic part: defense was not the main reason Toronto lost to Cleveland. The real issue was offense. This team did not have a true high-end offensive engine. Their main weapons were transition and ball movement. They were one of the fastest transition teams in the league, with Barnes and Barrett leading groups of athletic wings flying downhill. In the half court, they leaned heavily on off-ball movement, catch and shoot opportunities, drive and kick actions, and constant extra passing to create perimeter looks. They also ranked near the top of the league in cutting frequency, which helped mask the fact that they were not exactly loaded with elite shooter. That is where the problem started. The three-point shooting was inconsistent. Emmanuel Quickley was basically the only clearly above-average shooter on the team. So during the regular season, Toronto's offense survived through structure, movement, and discipline. But in the playoffs, when the pace slows, the passing windows shrink, and those off-ball actions get taken away, sooner or later, you need someone who can just go get a bucket against a loaded defense. Last season, that job was supposed to belong to Ingram, and in that environment, he simply could not deliver. Now enter Kawhi Leonard. Suddenly, Toronto has a real half-court answer. He gives them elite mid-range shot creation. He gives them extremely reliable catch and shoot offense. He can score with the ball or without it. And just like that, the ceiling of the offense jumps. That matters even more because Barnes is not really a pure jump shooting superstar. Against long mobile defenders like Dean Wade and Evan Mobley, some of his pull-up attempts clearly look forced. They are shots he can make, but not shots you want to build your playoff identity around. If those difficult possessions can now be handed to Kawhi, and handed to a player who just posted a true shooting percentage of 63%, then the biggest offensive weakness Toronto had may finally have a real solution. So when you zoom out, this is a massive upgrade. Compared with what it would have cost to chase a player like Giannis Antetokounmpo, the Raptors did not pay some absurd superstar superstar price here. In essence, they upgraded off Brandon Ingram while keeping most of their core rotation intact. And do not forget, this was already a team living around the 5th seed level in the East. Now you add Kawhi Leonard to that foundation, and you still have Emmanuel Quickley coming back after missing the playoffs. The depth is still there, the rotation is still there, the young player upside is still there. The roster still makes sense from top to bottom. Even without another move, this already looks like a team that belongs in the contender conversation. And the coaching matters too. Darko Rajakovic deserves a lot of credit. In the playoffs, once the series shifted back home, he made quick and smart matchup adjustments. He put Poltil on Mobley, Barnes on the guards, and Barrett on Allen, and that directly disrupted Cleveland's pick and roll structure. Toronto won 2 straight after that. Later, he also leaned into a no center lineup and stole another key game. That tells you something important. This is not a passive coach. He is willing to react, willing to gamble, and willing to reshape the geometry of a series if he believes there is an edge to exploit. Which brings us to the bigger picture. Right now, I think Toronto's pure basketball strength in the East would rank behind only the New York Knicks. You could even argue they have already moved ahead of the Celtics, Cavaliers, Heat, and Pistons. Boston is still caught up in the Jaylen Brown trade situation. With or without Brown, their regular season floor will probably remain high. But if they do not land a quality center, their playoff ceiling drops. Cleveland already got dragged to 7 games by this Raptors team last season, and that was with Brandon Ingram playing terrible. So if you remove Ingram and replace him with Kawhi Leonard, what exactly is Cleveland's answer now? Miami does not look stable either. They are very likely to lose Norman Powell, and even if they bring in Tim Hardaway Jr., that is nowhere near enough to push them into the real top tier, unless LeBron James somehow shows up. Detroit still has questions everywhere. Jalen Duren's extension situation remains unresolved. Moving Isaiah Stewart and bringing in Isaiah Joe does not fundamentally change their level. And even the Knicks, as strong as they look, still carry some downgrade risk of their own depending on whether Mitchell Robinson can be retained. So when you step back and compare the entire landscape, Toronto suddenly looks terrifying. A team that already defended with size, pressure, and attitude just added one of the greatest playoff shot makers of his era. A team that used to run out of answers in late clock offense now has a cold-blooded closer. A team built around the North just welcomed back the star who gave that identity its greatest moment. If Kawhi Leonard stays healthy, I really believe this version of the Raptors could become one of the most dangerous teams in the East. Honestly, they might be the team nobody wants to see next season.